Hey guys, Lisa here from My Copper Life. Today I'm going to show you how to make this holly pendant and earring set. So let's get started. The materials I used to make this project are as follows: 20 gauge wire, 18 gauge wire, 26 gauge wire, round nose pliers, bent chain nose pliers, flat nose pliers, chain nose pliers, flush cutters, 9 3mm gold beads, a pair of silver ear wires, 22-inch silver snake chain, and a metric ruler. To start the pendant, you will need 20 gauge silver wire. You can use whatever color you'd prefer. If you have other colors, you can do that. You can use green wire, you can use gold wire, you can use whatever color you want to use. There's all different variations of this. I'm going to measure out 25 centimeters of this 20 gauge wire. Now we're going to take the wire and we're going to measure about halfway. And with the round nose pliers, we're going to make a bend right at that halfway mark. So here we go, we're going to bend this up. And I'm just making sure I really pull that tight. And then with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to kind of smush this end so that it gets really tight and there's not much of a space. This is going to create the bottom of the holly leaf. So you want to make sure you get that nice and tight. And now we're going to just splay those wires apart, leaving the tip of that leaf together a little bit. I'm also going to snug it up just a little bit more. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to grab my round nose pliers and make the first bend for the first points on the sides of that holly leaf. Obviously we got the bottom point, but now we're going to make the side points. You want to try to get these kind of even as much as possible because they are kind of straight across from each other, although, you know, this is nature, so nothing in nature is exactly 100% symmetrical, so just have fun with it. Now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and I'm going to make that little point on this part of the leaf. And what I do is I grab in a little bit, maybe about a centimeter, and then bend that wire over and then pinch that closed. So I'm bending it over the top of itself and then pinching it closed. And now we're just going to bend this up and around into like a little U shape there. And then we're going to make the second point on this side. I like to get the tip of my chain nose pliers lined up with that first point on this side of the leaf. And then I'm going to bend this wire over just like we did the first point on top of itself and then squeeze that together so there's almost no space. As flat as possible. Sometimes this is a little difficult to do, especially with round wire. It's easier to do with square wire, so if you have square wire, you can definitely do this with square wire. Okay, now we're gonna bend it one last time into that U shape on this side. I like to make 3 little points. You can do 2 points if you want. I just like to do the 3 points. I think it just gives it more of that holly leaf characteristic to have the 3 points rather than just 2 points. And I'm trying to make this little U shape about the same as the last one. And then the tops of the little, or the bottoms of the U's, or the top of the M in this case, I'm trying to make them pretty even, straight across, just to make sure they're all the same size. Again, taking the tip of my chain nose pliers and lining that up and bring it in a little bit Bending that wire over the top, then squeezing it down, pinching that wire close together. And you see I'm doing that. And sometimes bending that wire back up makes it a little bit easier to do that. So now we're going to take this wire and bend it straight up toward the top of the pendant. This will make the top of that holly leaf. And here I'm going to start this side of the pendant now, which is basically a mirror image of the other side. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. Grab the chain nose plier, place it about the same distance as the last point. You want the outside of your plier to be at the same distance. And then if it's not quite the size you want it to be, there is a fix for this. So you can grab the round nose pliers and just sit it in there, and then either bend it out to make it a little bit larger or bend it in to make it a little smaller. And then taking the chain nose pliers, we're going to squeeze down on the first little point on this side. And once that's done, we're going to go ahead and do the other 2 points the same way. Just like the first side, we're going to go ahead and bend up that wire so that we can make our bail and to make the point where we're going to attach our gold berries to. And here I'm making some adjustments, so I'm kind of pushing both sides out a little bit, then bending it back in from the center so that it kind of widens the middle of that holly leaf out, so the center point actually comes out a little bit further than the other 2 points on each side. It makes it a little wider, and then you want to kind of pull those wires back to the point at the top and finish making any last minute minor changes you might want to do for the shape as I'm doing here. Now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and grab right above the holly leaf where those points come together at the top of the leaf, and then bend one of my wires out to the side at about a 90-degree angle, and then take the other wire and bend it down so it's kind of out of the way, because you need to make your little bail at this point. So we're going to make a little loop to make our bail. I'm going to wrap it around my round nose pliers, pulling it all the way past that wire at the bottom of the loop. Then taking the chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab the tail end of this wire and wrap it around one full time. So it's basically 2 wraps, because the first wrap goes around and then you go around with the second. And make sure that looks good where it's at. Then I'm going to squeeze up that wrap so it's nice and neat and tidy on both sides. Making sure it all looks good, then grab my flush cutters and cut off the end of this wire. And then we want to make sure that it's not going to poke anyone or stab anything or catch on things. So we're going to tuck the tail end of that wire up against the base wire underneath it. Now we're going to take the other side and bend that back into shape so that we get a nice point. And then bend that around the neck of that bail wire, one full rotation around. And then we're going to just make sure we snug that up and get it nice and neat and tidy. And now I'm going to make a little loop to hang our berries on. So I'm just going to turn this around into a little circle or a little loop. Sometimes that's easier than using the round nose pliers, but you can use the round nose pliers to help shape it in the end here, so that you're not really going to see this little loop because the berries are going to be on top of it. But I do use my round nose pliers to put through there and just kind of tighten that up a little bit, or loosen it up and then pull that in tight. And then take the tail end of this and wrap around the back side 1 time and then 2 times. And then bend that down toward the back. This is going to make the little center vein of the leaf. And you can shape this any way you want. I like to make almost like a little S curve. Now I'm going to take that wire and push it down through the leaf. So I'm looking at it here from the front of the leaf. I've got it turned around now. And then I'm going to bend that wire back over that the other base wire, kind of near the bottom point, and then snip off the excess wire. You want enough to kind of tuck it back down underneath there, because you're kind of forming a little loop at the end of this wire. So I'm going to take my bent chain nose pliers and just bend that down, and making sure that wire kind of lines up with the other side of this wire so that you're not seeing it when you turn it back over. It just kind of blends in with that vein as much as possible. And now the framework for the pendant is complete. I'm going to do any last minute adjustments that are needed, and then I'm going to bend that little loop in the center there up a little so that the next part will be a little easier to attach the little gold berries on. So now I'm grabbing my 26 gauge silver wire. Again, you can make this any color you want, probably green if you're using green or gold if you're using gold. And then I'm going to cut about a 6-inch length of this 26 gauge wire. Now I'm going to take the end of that wire and push it through the center of the loop. And then I'm going to wrap around 3 times. So there's 1, making sure we pull it tight. And then wrap the second time. Again, pulling it tight. And now the last time. And this is just going to secure that wire to the little ring. So when you put your beads on, they don't just pull right off. I usually like to do 3 wraps. That generally gives it enough to make sure that it doesn't come off. There we go, finishing that up. Adjusting and pushing that all together. And now we're going to get ready to add our first bead. So here I'm using the 3mm gold beads. I'm just going to pop that on there. And then with the end of my wire, make 1 single wrap around this loop. Now placing these gold beads on this ring, you want those gold beads to sit on top of the ring. So it takes a little adjustment to get that. You don't want it inside the ring or to the outside. You kind of want to hide that ring as much as possible. And then take your second 3mm gold bead, pop that on that wire, and then do another single wrap. The only thing you want to make sure of is that you make this nice and tight and snug, and that each bead ends up on top of that ring. Now we're going to grab that last final bead and pop that on there. And then instead of doing 1 single wrap here, we're going to do 3 wraps so that it ends this little section off. Now once we get that 3rd wrap around there, we're going to adjust all of our little berries and then make sure this is nice and pulled tight. Once we get everything where we want it, we pull that wire kind of toward the back and then snip off the tail there. Next, I'll grab my bent chain nose pliers to tuck the end of that little wire back behind so there aren't any little pokey pieces sticking out. And do the same on the other side. We don't want this snagging on any clothing. And there we have our berries added to our pendant. Because I made a little mistake here when designing this, I need to take my chain nose pliers and bend that bail at a 90-degree angle toward the back, so that way it'll sit on a chain properly. Now it's time to add our chain to our pendant. You can use whatever kind of chain you'd like to use. I choose to use these silver snake chains. They tend to hold heavier pendants and lighter pendants, so this is what I use for myself. And now we have our completed holly leaf pendant. So now we're going to take our 20 gauge wire to create our earrings. I usually use a little bit less wire for my earrings than I did for the pendant. So for the pendant I use 25 centimeters and for the earrings I'll use 20 centimeters. I'm going to cut 2 pieces of 20 centimeter lengths of wire. Now we're going to take that wire just like we did with the pendant, grab the round nose pliers, find the center part, and then bend that wire around the tip of the round nose pliers. And take the chain nose pliers and crimp the end of that until it's nice and snug and tight together. Then once we get that all where we want it to be, we're going to splay those wire ends open. And then leaving the point as much as possible, we're going to grab the round nose pliers to create our bends for the first points on the sides. Try to get them as close as possible. They don't need to be perfect. Now we're going to grab the chain nose pliers and bend that wire back over itself. And you want it to come in a little bit closer than we did with the pendant because these are a little smaller. And then crimping that wire as close as possible. And then bending that wire into that little U shape just like we did on the pendant. Just a bit smaller than the pendant. Next, take the chain nose pliers, line it up with your first point on the side, and then bend that middle point over. Making sure to crimp that closed, and bend that wire back if need be, so you can get a better crimp. There we go. Now we're going to bend this back into another U shape, making the third point on this side. I'm trying to make them pretty much the same. They don't need to be perfect. But here I am trying to adjust it as perfect as I can get it because I'm a perfectionist. Now we're going to take our pliers again and Make sure we get that about as even as the last point, crimping that point together. And then we're gonna bend our wire up toward the top to make the bail. Now we're just gonna repeat everything on the second side, just as we did the first one. And just like we did with the pendant, we're going to bend that up toward the top so that we can start our bail. So now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and put these two together, grab it from the back side, and bend that wire at a 90-degree angle. Then getting the other wire out of the way. Like that. Now I'm going to make the loop for my ear wire to hang through. And now this one we do want the loop to face the direction I'm making it. I'm going to grab that loop with my chain nose pliers to hold on to it, and then I'm going to wrap around 2 times. Then I'll snip off the excess with my flush cutters, and then tuck the tail back down against that base wire. Now I'm going to take the other wire and shape that back to make the point of my holly leaf, and then wrap around the back 1 time, and then make my little loop for the beads. Again, you can take your round nose pliers through the back to shape that hole or loop. Sorry, I'm off screen there a bit. And now wrap around the back and then shape my little vein for the leaf. Again, I'm going to do that little S shape, then push that wire back up through, and then bend it around the frame of the holly leaf. And then cut off the excess wire, leaving a little tail so you can bend it down underneath there. Just like that. And now we have a completed frame for our holly leaf. And I completed the second earring off camera. Next, we're going to grab the 26 gauge silver wire. And again, I'm going to cut maybe about an 8-inch piece. Again, I'm going to use these 3mm gold beads to make the berries on these leaves. So now I'm going to take the tail end of that wire after lifting up that little loop, and I'm going to wrap this first loop 3 times, just as we did with the pendant. Tuck all those wires in close together there, and get ready to start to put the 3mm gold beads on. So here I'm putting that first one in, and then going to wrap a single time around the loop, ensuring that that 3mm bead sits on top of the little loop. Now we're going to add the second bead and wrap that around, making it nice and tight and snug. And now the third bead. Now after this third bead, we're going to wrap 3 wraps onto the loop, making sure it's all nice and tight and snug. Once we get around our third time here, we're going to pull it all nice and tight, make any adjustments we need to, and then cut off the excess wire. And then snug that back behind so we don't get it caught on any sweaters or anything. And we're going to cut the second side off, snug that up, and then there we have our 2 earrings completed. One thing I forgot to mention is that when I make the second ear wire, I want to do a mirror image. So notice the veining of the leaf is facing the opposite direction in the second side. Now I'm going to grab my 2 ear wires. You can learn how to make these by watching my snowman pendant and earring tutorial. I have a built-in tutorial in it on how to make these ear wires. So now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and bend that little loop out to the side, not forward because you'll misshape your little loop. Always bend your loops to the side and then bend them back. Doing this will also harden your wire so that that loop will be nice and strong. And there is the completed earring. Now let's put the second side on. And here are the completed holly leaf pendant and earrings. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed creating it. We'll see you guys next Thursday. Bye!